I'm the last survivor of this haunted town. I live by these fears. Nobody believed me when I told them the truth about Millfield. They thought I was crazy, delusional, traumatized by the unspeakable tragedy that destroyed our little town. But now all those doubters are dead. I'm the only one left who knows what really happened here, and I live each day in constant fear of the evil that still lurks in the shadows of this place. Evil that took everything and everyone I ever loved. My therapist says writing it all down will help, a way to face the nightmares and find closure. I'm not sure I believe that, but I have to try something, because the terror is always there, just below the surface, threatening to pull me under. The least I can do is warn the world, even if no one will listen. This is my story. Fear number 1. Never go out after dark. The first thing you need to know about Millfield is that you never, under any circumstances, go outside after the sun goes down. I learned that the hard way when I was 16. It started as a silly teenage dare, like most bad ideas do at that age. Stay out until midnight on the old covered bridge. Simple enough, right? Oh, how naive we were back then. My boyfriend Gavin picked me up after my shift at the diner. We drove out to Rothman's Road where the bridge crossed the Millstone River. Even in the day, it was a spooky old structure. Ancient timbers full of rot and woodworm, missing planks underfoot where you could see the black ribbon of water churning below. Legends of spurned lovers and lynched men haunted its history. Gavin brought a blanket and a thermos of spiked cider to keep us warm. We cuddled together, telling ghost stories until the moon rose pregnant and amber above the tree line. The first sign something was wrong was the mist. It crept in slowly, just barely wisping around the old support beams at first. But it kept building, getting thicker, swirling like tentacles reaching into the bridge. It muffled sound, making everything unnaturally quiet and still. Then the whispers started. Voices that seemed to emanate from the mist itself, hissing and sibilant. Words in some ancient tongue neither of us recognized. But something about the cadence filled me with dread. Like whatever spoke was profoundly unnatural and evil. When the screaming started echoing out in the darkness beyond the bridge, unearthly wails of agony and rage, I begged Gavin to take me home. But when we tried to leave, the mist grabbed him. That's the only way I can describe it. Pale tendrils wrapped around his legs, yanking him off his feet. His hands clawed desperately at the old boards as it dragged him into the darkness. I lunged to grab him, but my fingers only brushed against his as the mist swallowed him whole. I'll never forget the sheer terror in his eyes before he vanished. I ran to the car, the mist licking at my heels. Even as I sped away, I could still hear Gavin's muffled screams. He was shrieking my name, begging me to help him. But there was nothing I could do. They never found his body. Most people assumed he ran away, that we'd had a lover's quarrel. But I knew the truth. I never set foot outside Millfield after sundown again. Fear number 2. Don't look into the Aberdelli boy's eyes. The Aberdellis were an old family who lived in a run-down colonial farmhouse on the edge of town. Mr. Aberdelli had gone mad and hung himself in the early 80s. Mrs. Aberdelli died in childbirth not long after. They said her labour screams haunted the Pine Barrens for years. That left the Aberdelli boy, Jesse, orphaned under the care of his ancient great-grandmother, Nina. Strange, inbred folks, said my gran. The whole town knew to stay well away. Even the hardcore bully crowd at school gave Jesse a wide berth. Jesse was only a few years younger than me, but his presence unnerved me from the day he first showed up to class. He was bone-thin with lank dark hair that hung in his eyes that were so dark brown they looked black. And when he stared at you, which he did often, it felt like he was dissecting your soul, laying bare your most private shames. I always hustled my little sister Jenna past the Aberdelli house as quickly as possible on our way to school. especially after the stray cats started going missing from the neighbourhood. Then Mr. Finster, the crotchety widower who lived next door to the Aberdellis, turned up dead one morning. He looked like he'd been swarmed by rabid weasels, his throat and belly torn to red ribbons. That same day I caught Jesse Aberdelli staring at me in homeroom, except it wasn't really like staring at all. It was like he was trying to burrow into my mind, to wrest control of my thoughts and bend them to his will. I felt a darkness start to unfurl inside me, an oily sickness that crept through my veins. It wanted me to do terrible, violent things, to the teacher, to my classmates, to myself. Its claws sunk into my brain, icy and insistent. It took every speck of my willpower to break away from Jesse's gaze. As I wrenched my eyes down to my desk, I swore I saw him smile, just a little. A smug twitch at the corner of his bloodless lips. He knew how close I'd come to succumbing, to letting him subsume me. After that, I trained myself to never look higher than Jesse's chin, to never risk meeting those eyes. Fear number 3. Avoid the mill pond at all costs. Millfield was named for the big old grist mill that used to sit on the banks of the mill pond. The mill had burned down ages ago, leaving nothing but a stone foundation choked with weeds and the algae-scummed pond festering like an open sore. As kids, we always steered clear of the mill pond. Not because our parents warned us, but because of Delaney Sutter. Delaney had been a few years ahead of me in school. Your typical bored, small-town teen hungry for thrills. Delaney and her burnout friends used to dare each other to jump off the ruins of the old mill into the mill pond. A toxic soup of rotted vegetation, and God knows what else. Then, one muggy summer night, Delaney's luck ran out. She surfaced screaming bloody murder, thrashing like she was being attacked by a shark. Her friends hauled her out, but by then, Delaney wasn't Delaney anymore. She spewed gallons of brackish sludge from her mouth, along with a tangle of skeletal pondweeds. Her eyes were nothing but gaping black pits. She hissed and flailed like a rabid beast, clawed at her friends until they fled in terror. Then Delaney loped off into the woods and disappeared. Search parties found no trace of her. After that, no one dared even get close to the mill pond, much less swim in it. Fast forward to senior year. Jenna had just turned 16 and passed her driving test. She was pretty, popular, always pushing boundaries. I worried about her constantly. She fought with our folks about going to some rager in the Pines, stormed out with the keys to my old Ford Tempo, tires squealing angrily. The road she took wound right past the mill pond. It was nearly 1 a.m. when Sheriff Delaney knocked on our door, his face grave. There had been an accident. They found my Tempo wrapped around a tree, compacted like an accordion. Jenna had missed the curve, he said, probably speeding. They pulled her body from the wreck. Except as they zipped up the body bag, I swore I saw a flicker of movement inside, a twitch that rattled the bag. I convinced myself it was just a trick of the flashing lights. When we buried Jenna 3 days later, I thought I heard muffled thumping as the casket was lowered into the ground. It had to be my imagination. Grief and exhaustion playing cruel tricks. The alternative was too horrible to contemplate. But that night, as I visited her fresh grave to say goodbye, the dug earth was disturbed, like something had clawed its way out from below, and I swear I glimpsed a familiar shape loping towards the mill pond in the moonlight, leaving a trail of muck behind. I've never been back to Jenna's grave, or the mill pond. I just can't. Because if I do, I might see what she's become. I live with that possibility every day. Fear number 4. The Crimson Congregation is always recruiting. The Crimson Congregation showed up in Millfield about a year after Jenna died. A whole convey of sleek black luxury cars with out-of-state plates. They bought the abandoned church on Wyckoff and hung their sigil above the door, an 8-pointed star enclosed in a crimson circle. When I asked my friend Olivia, who worked at the county clerk's office, about them, she said they were some kind of spiritual organization focused on metaphysical transcendence. I didn't buy that for a second. Sure, they wore expensive suits instead of hoods and robes, but I knew a cult when I saw one, and there was something about the way their eyes followed you that made your skin crawl, like they were undressing your deepest vulnerabilities, probing for weak points. They targeted the most vulnerable first. Aimless teens, seniors with dementia, anyone isolated and craving belonging. Their outreach spread through Millfield like a virus. Soon half the town was spouting their doublespeak about embracing our full potential through unity. Even my own mother started attending their Wednesday night illumination sessions. I only went to one, just to see what the fuss was about. The congregation leader, Nathaniel, was the most charismatic, unsettling man I'd ever met. Magnetism and malice poured off him in equal measure. When he spoke, it took everything in me not to be swept away. He preached about shedding our mortal fetters to ascend to a higher plane, surrendering our egos to the collective overmind, sacrificing the individual for the cosmic whole. Not gonna lie, it sounded like the ramblings of a lunatic, but the audience lapped it up. Then the communion began. Nathaniel produced an ornate ritual blade. The ruby embedded in the hilt seemed to throb like a beating heart. He ran the edge along his own forearm, crimson beaded against his white cuff, his blood. He passed the blade to the first congregant. Row by row, every man, woman, and child repeated the act, sharing Nathaniel's tainted blood in some twisted communion. Their eyes glazed with fanatic purpose. I wanted to scream, to shake them out of this madness, but I was paralyzed. When the blade reached my row, I fled. I couldn't be part of this, no matter how hard the pull to conform. That was the last time I saw my mother as herself. After that, she was simply one more vacant-eyed disciple, mind and will subsumed. I'll never stop hearing Nathaniel's final words to the congregation that night. Embrace the blood, embrace the overmind, shed your skin, become more, join us. I live in fear that one day I'll give in. Fear number 5. Stay far away from the radio tower. The old Cold War radio tower on the hill was always a bit of a local legend. Some said the government used it for mind control experiments, others that it was a portal to another dimension. I didn't put much stock in the stories, at least not until that final, awful night when the world ended. But I'm getting ahead of myself. All I knew is that ever since the Crimson congregation showed up, there was always someone up at the tower. Vans and equipment coming and going at all hours. Strange frequencies would sometime crackle through on people's TV and radio, squealing static and what sounded like human screams, echoing into the ether. It gave me the willies. Then people started to change. It wasn't like the congregation's glassy indoctrination. This was something else. A sickness that seemed to radiate out from the radio tower, riding the airwaves into people's homes and minds. It started with the nightmares. Terrible visions of fleshy abominations and skies that rained viscera, the kind of bone-deep primal terror that leaves you shaking and sweat-drenched. But we couldn't wake from them. The nightmares followed us into the waking world, clinging like oil slicks. Then came the physical changes. It was little things at first. An extra knuckle forming on a finger, teeth growing in too sharp and too numerous, the whites of an eye filling with inky darkness. I told myself I was seeing things. But then Mr. Gleason, the butcher, ruptured like a hot water bottle in the middle of his shop. His flesh parted like an overripe fruit to birth a writhing mass of tentacles and mouths. Mrs. Hotchkiss liquefied into a puddle of bubbling goo during Sunday service, spattering the screaming congregation. Toby Walcott's pine tree burst through his chest like an obscene jack-in-the-box while he mowed the lawn. It was chaos, pandemonium, and at the centre of it all, that damned radio tower pulsed and thrummed, belching out more of its warping radiation. Even now I swear I can feel it, burrowing into my cells, trying to remake me, to transform me into one of those things. I knew I had to get out of Millfield, had to get as far away from that tower as I possibly could. But everywhere I turned, the roads were choked with crashed cars, downed power lines, the ruptured remnants of my former neighbours. The whole town was one seething mass of mutation and madness. Somehow I fought my way out. I still don't know how. Luck, desperation, some last vestige of the stubborn grit this town inscribed on my bones. All I know is that I ran until the radio tower was a speck on the horizon and the screams faded to echoes. Ran until my lungs burned and my muscles gave out. I collapsed on the far side of the Morecambe County line as the rising sun painted the sky the colour of a fresh bruise. When I looked back, Millfield was gone. Just empty fields and forest as far as the eye could see. No sign remained of the town that had been my whole world, like it had never existed at all. I've been running ever since, town to town, always looking over my shoulder, always fighting the call of that sickening frequency in my blood, always fearing that I'm the only one left who knows the truth, that if it happened in Millfield, it could happen anywhere, that one day we'll all become the monsters we harbour within, because now I know that tower was never just a local legend. It was a door, and the congregation opened it to let something in, something that's still out there, waiting to remake us all. A final warning. The doctors tell me there's no sign of Millfield on any map, that my delusions are a result of some unspecified trauma. But I know what I lived through. I still see it every time I close my eyes. Not just the horrors, but the lives cut short, the innocence shattered, the lives destroyed. Gavin, who never got to grow up because he loved a girl stupid enough to tempt fate. Delaney, warped into something unspeakable by the waters that were supposed to keep our town alive. Jenna, my beautiful baby sister, forever loping through the dark pines, no longer human. My mother, robbed of will and identity, devoured by the Crimson Congregation's communion. Everyone I ever knew, corrupted and remade, flesh and bone surrendered to forces beyond comprehension. This is my warning. The evil that destroyed Millfield isn't gone. It's out there, creeping through radio static and lurking in dark waters. It's in the thrum of cultist chants and the flutter of insectile wings in the night. It wears 100 different masks, all hungry for our minds, our terror, our suffering. So remember my fears. Never go out after dark. Don't look into eyes that swallow your soul. Avoid bodies of water that fester with secrets. Beware the honeyed words of false prophets. And if you hear a strange frequency riding the airwaves, run. Run as far and as fast as you can, because the monsters we deny are the ones that will devour us in the end. Just like they consumed my hometown, my friends, my family, everything I ever loved. Of course, there's always the chance that I really am crazy, that Millfield never existed at all except within the shattered labyrinth of my traumatized mind, that these horrors are nothing more than the nightmares of a damaged psyche. But ask yourself, can you really take that risk? In a world where the boundaries between nightmare and reality grow thinner by the day, can you afford to dismiss the warnings of a madwoman? I'll let you decide. But don't say I didn't warn you. The darkness is waiting, and it's so very, very hungry. If you want to dive deeper into the forbidden secrets and chilling mysteries of Millfield, be sure to like this video and subscribe to Unholy Tales. New nightmares are always just a click away, and remember, the best way to survive the horror is to face it together. So join our community of darkness dwellers and share your own tales of terror in the comments below. Until next time, sweet dreams, if you dare.